Good morning. It's Tuesday, October 16th, debate day in America. And today we're going to be talking about shifting polls, the rumblings of a possible shift in the electoral map, and also a Secretary of State taking the fall for a Benghazi story that won't go away as you take a live look at Times Square. Going to have a nicer day in New York today. I'm in L.A., but with us on set in New York, we have MSNBC contributor Mike Barnicle, MSNBC and Time Magazine senior political analyst Mike Halperin, also national affairs editor for New York Magazine and MSNBC political analyst John Heilemann, also Pulitzer Prize winning historian John Meacham. Well, guys, we've got exactly 3 weeks to go until Election Day, and tonight, obviously, is the big debate. It's going to be a town hall style debate, and some new polls are out. Let's take a look at again. We've got a shift possibly in the electoral map. This morning, a new USA Today Gallup poll shows growing momentum for Mitt Romney in the 12 key battleground states, including those states that are going to decide the outcome of the election: Ohio, Florida, and Virginia. The poll has Romney pulling ahead by 4 points among likely voters, 50 to 46. This is obviously a big shift. It's only one poll, but perhaps the bigger takeaway from this poll and some others is how the candidates are ranking among likely women voters in those battleground states. We've heard an awful lot about the gender gap since the Republican primary season, but among likely female voters in swing states, Mitt Romney's pulling almost even with the president, 48 to 49%. Among male voters in swing states, Romney has an 8-point lead over the president. Mark, let's start with you. You're reporting right now that senior Democratic officials are starting to talk to you about real concern about the possibility of the Buckeye State slipping away from the Obama campaign. Of course, you talk to Democrats, Mark, and they'll tell you that they're always overly concerned. The polls still show Barack Obama well ahead, but they're starting to see Florida definitely shift in the polls, and now they're afraid this may be happening in Ohio. Tell us why. As we have got a huge debate tonight, and also talk about that electoral map.
Well, look, there were two fundamentals that were keeping the president as the heavy favorite, as far as I was concerned, to win re-election for a long time. One was the Electoral College and the fact that he just started with a larger Electoral College base. Governor Romney really needed to win almost all the toss-ups. And the second thing that he had a big advantage on was defining Mitt Romney as an unacceptable choice, that you couldn't vote for Mitt Romney and Romney was going to have a ceiling. That first debate had such a big impact on making Romney seem like an acceptable choice. And it also now has changed the balance in the Electoral College. If Governor Romney is able to win the 3 southern states of the 9 toss-ups, Florida, Virginia, North Carolina, and Ohio, he's not a favorite in Ohio, but he's now got a position to win Ohio. You look at that map, all of that red, that gets him to 266. If he can take Ohio, and I talked to 2 Democrats yesterday who now think it's possible that the president's position in Ohio will erode to such an extent that he could lose it. 266 means all Governor Romney would need to do would win one of those 5 toss-ups in yellow. And that's a huge change. That map gives Governor Romney the Electoral College advantage that the president has long enjoyed.
Mark, we should be clear. If you look at that map, you're not calling Ohio right now.
No, not at all.
For Romney, this is just a scenario.
But I was struck yesterday at how some Democrats now believe that what had been a clear advantage in Ohio for a long time is now something that is eroded. Governor Romney, if he's an acceptable choice, not just nationally, but in Ohio, I think he is a strong Ohio candidate in a state that 2 years ago elected a Republican governor, a Republican senator in contested races.
You know, you're seeing, Joe mentioned that how big a debate this is. This is yet another reason why, beyond all of the symbolic, Obama stumbles last time and now needs to come back to change the narrative. We're getting down to where this race is, where we actually all thought it was going to be for the last, up until the conventions. Anybody at this table would have said, wow, this is going to be a razor-close election. The ground game's going to matter. Turnout's going to matter. The map's going to be tight. And then for 6 weeks, we thought, wow, things are really fundamentally changed. Well, we're back to that original conception again. And so every little thing matters. And this is not a little thing that's going to happen tonight on this debate stage. As Willie talked this morning about how historically debate audiences rise. I think in this case, the debate audience is more likely to rise even more because of the extent to which people around the country, whether they like President Obama, don't like President Obama, or are undecided about what they think, they want to know. Can he rise to this challenge? And really the onus of the challenge is very clearly tonight on the president because of the failure before and because of the erosion that we're talking about now across these battleground states.
Yeah. Hey, John Meacham, John Heilemann yesterday said something that I've also been saying, that as we get further away from the first debate, Barack Obama's failure took on sort of an urban legend, had an urban legend feel to it, you know, where the night of the debate you're going, boy, he's just off. He seemed, you know, I had a guy, a big Democrat yesterday, come up to me going, I think the president's suffering from depression.
Yeah.
Like, really?
Yeah.
He just had an off night. Reagan had an off night in '84. But it did really change the dynamic of this race and has gotten everybody to the point now where even Democrats are starting to see this slip away. Talk about historically how quickly that narrative can change in one night. If Mitt Romney looks awkward tonight, if he can't interact with the audience well, if he does what 41 did, he looks at the watch, he looks bored. Talk about how huge tonight is. It can also go, of course, the other way. If Mitt Romney has a great night tonight and Barack Obama looks awkward about all these people, then you really could start to see slipping of support. But, I mean, tonight, this is one of the biggest debates, given the dynamics of this race, I think, probably since 1980.
It is, and it's the second as opposed to the only one. But, you know, in terms of Denver, I mean, it's also true that Gallipoli may not have seemed quite as bad at first until the numbers kept pouring in. So that's one thing to think about with the president. But sure, yes, I mean, I suppose Romney could come out and reignite the stiff Richie Rich thing and say, you know, if you need a job, you can come work in my car elevator. Seems pretty unlikely he's going to do that. So this is the president's to change, I think. And it feels to me as though, to go to Mark's point, what happened in the past 2 weeks is that what political scientists have said, and what I think a lot of us have thought, in an environment that is so fundamentally anti-incumbent by every statistical measure, the economy, the right track, wrong track, all of that, and has been for so long, people have been looking for a reason, a plausible reason, responsible reason, to vote against the president. And it wouldn't have mattered who the president was, to vote against the incumbent. Yeah. And Obama gave that to them in Denver. And now we'll see if, I don't know how many times people have already used this cliche, but I'll stake it out for this morning the first time. Can Romney begin to close a deal tonight?
Yeah. And John Meacham, that's a great question. It was also a great 1914 reference at 6:07 in the morning, and we thank you for that.
Here to help.
Mike Barnacle, I'm sorry he stole your Gallipoli reference from you, but soldier on and tell us what you're thinking about tonight and, again, these shifting polls.
Well, you know, Joe, yesterday was a day when people actually returned my phone call, so I might bring a little more to the table today.
One day of every year.
It's about time.
What was that like?
Yeah. It was unusual. It was a busy day for me.
Barnacle's like, what's that sound? Oh, it's a ringing phone.
But one point that John Heilemann made, we are now at a point in this election where we all thought we'd be months ago. It's going to be very close. It is going to be a jump ball election. But anecdotally and from talking to people, you also get the impression that when these two guys sit down to write Game Change 2, the focus on what happened in Denver is going to be enormous, I think, and that's what you hear. What happened in Denver clearly, and John Meacham just alluded to it, is that the President of the United States made Mitt Romney a plausible alternative. He made him a plausible alternative. And as a result, you now have places like Ohio and other states very much in play for Governor Romney. The President of the United States, again, from speaking to people yesterday and looking at the internals of their own polls, appeared not to want the job as much as Governor Romney did. And it had a huge ripple effect, apparently, within this country. So we're at the point now where tonight is just, as you indicated, as important a debate as we've had in a presidential election since 1980.
Mark, do you agree that one thing the president does have going for him tonight is not just expectations that whatever he does, if it's positive at all, it will be a success, but that he does have not only Democrats, but let's be honest, some members, many members perhaps of the media, poised to say he's back. This is a redemption story. He had a bad first night. He's back. He's done it. He's back in command of this race. Don't you think that takes hold almost regardless of what happens tonight?
On the first point, I actually don't think so. I think the expectations aren't that the president somehow is a horrible communicator and horrible in debate. So I don't think he's benefiting from low expectations. And in the second point, putting my finger on the pulse of the media wing of the Gang of 500 and trying to psych out what you're talking about, I actually don't think so. I think the press prefers the narrative right now. I'm not advocating this, just telling you what my sense of the zeitgeist. I think the press prefers the narrative right now is of the president unable to figure out how to master doing a debate. I think there's just as much interest in that narrative to the extent that influences coverage as there is a comeback story. Maybe the comeback story for the third debate. But on this one, I don't think he's got some big advantage either in the press psyche or in the public mood.
Now, Willie, aren't we going to look pretty silly tomorrow morning? Everybody going to look silly. The press, the Gang of 500, everybody. If the president just shows up and seems engaged, he hasn't gotten here by accident. What's the Bill Clinton?
Turtle on a fence post.
A turtle on a fence post didn't get there by accident. Well, Barack Obama didn't make history by accident, right? I mean, do we think that he is going to be flat 2 nights in a row, or are the expectations going to be so low?
He won't be flat. I think the biggest challenge for him is describing a second-term agenda. I'm almost certain that Candy will pick some questions that require the president to talk about what he would do in a second term, why it would be different than the first term in places people didn't like. And that, it's not a question of being flat. It's a question of he still hasn't found a way to answer that question to the satisfaction of a lot of voters.
Let me just take mild exception to 2 things that have just been said. One is I agree with Mark about the media, but it's always the case that the media wants to write the story about Mitt Romney not being able to connect with real people. And this is something John Meacham mentioned, whether he will or will not be able to. It's a fair, normal, intuitive assumption that Mitt Romney will not talk about his car elevator or whatever, but fair, normal, reasonable assumptions have not applied in the past to Mitt Romney's ability to communicate with real people very often. And so the possibility that some voter will ask him a question that flummoxes him, that makes him seem out of touch, that makes him seem like he can't relate to a normal average voter is high. I mean, we've seen lots of examples of it over the last year and a half. So it would not be unprecedented for him to do that.
I am told that in one of the debate sessions at one point, he was taking a mock question and he said to the voter, "Excuse me, sir, may I have some Grey Poupon?" So that could happen. Well, at least they worked that out.
Wow. So the second thing, just let me say about the thing that John said there earlier, which is, whether Governor Romney can close the deal. It's just a little too early to say that. He's still behind. Yeah. In almost every metric. He's made huge gains from where he was 2 weeks ago. But we just had a poll yesterday, so let's not be totally amnesiac. Yesterday, the Washington Post ABC poll had the president ahead, having made a gain of 1 point, according to its national poll, compared to where he was before the debate.
Well,
so
and John, the most important thing. John, the most important thing there, too, talk about it. We've been talking about for a year now that the president can't get over 50%. So this ABC News Washington Post poll shows that he's cracking 50% in a lot of the key areas. Again, I think this Romney surge is real in Florida. I think it's going to be real in North Carolina. I think it's real in Virginia. I do think that Mitt Romney's making some great gains. But again, we've got a different poll every day. And you look at the ABC News Washington Post poll yesterday, he's over 50% and strong for the first time in a long time. So we have to wait a couple of days to see how all this stuff shakes out, right?
Yes, the 51% approval rating was one of a number of things in that poll yesterday that the president could take comfort in. Another was the fact that the president still, after a year of being behind Mitt Romney on the question of who would better handle the economy, is now ahead of Mitt Romney. And the right track, wrong track number is trending in exactly the right direction for the president. Still more people say wrong track, but it's now in the low 50s as opposed to the mid 60s where it was 6 months ago. So, look, no one is on the brink of closing this deal right now. Neither of them. They're both in a very, very tight race. The president's still slightly ahead, but that's, again, it's why this debate matters so much, because no one's exactly ready to close anything.
Right. But it is Romney having to close the deal, having acknowledged the cliche, close the deal on his plausible run here.
Yes, I agree with that. Totally.